Today we announced the formation of the Safe Climate Caucus. The Safe Climate Caucus so far is composed of 22 members of the House who have made a commitment that every day one of us will go to the House floor and talk about the urgent need to address climate change. In his inaugural address, President Obama talked about our moral responsibility not to betray our children and future generations and deal with this issue. On Tuesday, in the State of the Union address, he called on Congress to pursue a bipartisan and market-based solution to climate change. Unfortunately, the Republican majority in the House refuses to acknowledge that there is climate change occurring, as amazing as that is. In the last 2 years, the Republican-led House of Representatives voted 53 times to block legislation or any action on climate change. And in our committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has primary jurisdiction over legislation in this area, the Republican leadership will not even call hearings to listen to experts, to hear from the scientists who have done great work trying to understand this problem. The Safe Climate Caucus is banding together to end the conspiracy of silence in the House of Representatives about the dangers of climate change. At least one of us will speak on the floor of the House every day we're in session about the historic challenge we face and the need for congressional action. We recognize that the Republicans control what hearings are held, what bills are considered. But we won't sit quietly while those who run the House deny the science and ignore the greatest challenges we face. We have the right to speak on the floor directly to the American people, and we intend to exercise that right every day to draw attention to the threat of climate change. I'm proud of the diversity of the caucus. The Safe Climate Caucus has senior ranking members like Ed Markey, Chris Van Hollen, and Jim Moran, and also new members like Jared Huffman and Tulsi Gabbard. We have members from all regions of the country: Massachusetts, Vermont, Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, Tennessee, Missouri, and Minnesota, New Mexico, Arizona, California, and Oregon. What unites us is our understanding that climate change is the moral issue of our time. We believe we have an obligation to use our voices to raise awareness of the dangers we are creating for our children and our grandchildren if we do not act now. I am the most senior member of our caucus, and now I'm going to recognize the most junior member of our caucus, Jared Huffman. Representative Huffman was just elected to Congress in November. Prior to his arrival in Washington, he served in the California Assembly, and before that was a senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council. He brings to our efforts the enthusiasm of a new member and the experience of a longtime expert in environmental conservation, and he's going to make a great contribution to the Safe Climate Caucus and to the Congress. And then we'll proceed in a unusual way for these kinds of presentations. We're going to alternate between senior and junior members until every member has had a chance to speak. Because we are a large group, I ask every member to speak for just 1 minute, and then we'll be here to answer questions from the press. Jared.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for forming this group and spearheading this effort, leading the climate fight in Congress. Tuesday night, we heard President Obama make a very bold and clear commitment to addressing climate change, and I'm proud to be part of the group, part of this climate change chorus in Congress that is going to help carry that vision forward in the 113th Congress. I truly believe that climate change, both greenhouse gas reduction and adaptation, is the greatest imperative of our time, not just because of the huge stakes for our environment, for our economy, and for our planet, but because of the enormous opportunity this issue presents us with. Confronting climate change will require major investments in infrastructure, in new technologies, high-quality jobs, and energy independence. These are things that are going to make our country stronger, healthier, and more prosperous. I have the honor of representing a large coastal district in Northern California. We know the dangerous impact of severe weather. Climate change is going to impact my coastal district, not just in terms of the coastal communities and infrastructure, but also the health of our oceans, our coastal fisheries. It will impact the great ancient forests in my district. It will even threaten to impact the world-class quality of the wine produced in Sonoma and Mendocino County. So we have a huge stake, and the lives of my constituents are very much at stake, I think, in this issue. Thankfully, California has already taken bold steps to combat climate change with our state's world-leading greenhouse gas reduction law. But that's not enough. We need leadership here at the federal level, and that's what this group is all about. It is time to get climate change back on our national radar, to break through the fog of climate deniers, and to confront this issue for the good of our districts, our country, and our planet. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to do this important work.
You get to introduce.
And I am introducing, I have the great honor to introduce Congressman Jim Moran. Congressman Moran serves as the ranking member on the Interior and Environment Appropriations Subcommittee, and he's taken the lead in fighting against harmful anti-environment legislation. He's one of the true leaders on environment issues in the Congress. It's my pleasure to introduce him.
Thank you very much. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Good to have you. That's good. You're a keeper. It's a fact that the extreme weather events that we are experiencing are a result of the increased concentrations of greenhouse gases that could not have been brought about by natural factors alone. They are a result of human activity. And it is only through the human will of the people on this planet that we are going to arrest this increasing threat to global security, to the livelihoods of millions of people, and ultimately to the preservation of our entire planet. The GAO just came out with a report that put climate change at the top of their list of highest risk factors in terms of the stability of our government. We can't predict how much this is going to cost us, although we know that Hurricane Sandy was not unique. We're going to continue to have to put out tens of billions of dollars every year, probably more every year, to deal with ever more devastating weather events. The droughts, the floods, this is going to become the new normal. And so that's why we are combining our voices to amplify, as was suggested, the chorus of citizens who want to speak out on climate change. It's not just our constituents. There are constituents in every congressional district in the country, even though not all of their representatives are on board yet. But we have to do something. It has to be a major commitment, and that's why we're here. And so at this point, I want to introduce someone who shares that commitment. Donna Edwards has been a leading voice of conservation and environmental protection in the Congress. She's a champion of clean energy innovation. We're fortunate to have her as a member of the Safe Climate Caucus. Donna.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you very much to Mr. Waxman and to all of our colleagues. We're here for a reason. Just a few weeks ago, I jumped into the Potomac to draw attention to climate change.
I saw you do that.
It turns out that it was the coldest day, though, that we had seen in 2 years. But the point is that then the week later, it was one of the warmest days that we had seen in a couple of years in a January, February. And the fact is that every year our climate is changing. The temperatures, the Earth's temperatures are warming. Our sea levels are rising. And it's time for us not to just sit on the sidelines, but to do something about it. And so I'm pleased to be a part of the Safe Climate Caucus because it's not enough that we just draw public attention. We have to turn the president's words in both his inauguration address and his State of the Union message into real action. And we have to do that by looking at ways that we can conserve, ways that we can reduce our emissions, ways that we can make changes in our lifestyles and the way that we do business in order to make a real dent in this changing climate. Just yesterday, in front of our science committee, we heard from so-called experts on climate change and on environmental policy. It turns out that they were not experts at all. They were just the people that the Republican majority calls forward to continue to be deniers of real science. But the fact is that those of us who are here are not alarmist. We are not eco-hystericals. We're not socialists. We care about our climate. And we want to do something about it. And the Republican majority can either join us in making the changes that are going to make a difference for our children and for future generations and for the health and safety and durability and sustainability of this earth, or they can sit back and do nothing at all of our peril. I happen to be, like my colleagues here, from the great state of Maryland. And we're not California, but in fact, Maryland's coastline is the fourth largest coastline in the country. The Chesapeake Bay that is just off of our coast is actually home to about $2 billion in industry. That if we do nothing about what is happening, that it will destroy our economy, it will destroy our state, and it'll have a broad impact, not just here in this country, but around the world. And so I'm glad to join our Safe Climate Caucus. You can count on me, Mr. Chairman, to be on that floor every single week, drawing attention to something that we have to do. We have an obligation to future generations to do something about. And to continue to say, you know what, it cannot be junk science when every Nobel scientist tells us that the climate is changing, that temperatures are warming, and that we as human beings have something to do with that. It's not pseudoscience, it's not junk science, it's not alarming, but it's alarming enough for us to do something about it. And with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, a real champion, who has Congressman Earl Blumenauer, who has a long legislative record and has helped pass laws that promote clean energy and fight global warming. And just earlier this week, Mr. Blumenauer introduced legislation designed to eliminate oil and gas tax preferences that would save American taxpayers $40 billion over the next 5 years. Earl?
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Donna. And I know you're all wondering, another caucus? Aren't there 463 of them for the 435 members of the House? Well, this is serious business, and it's necessary to have a mechanism like this. It was my privilege to work with Chairman Waxman on climate and energy issues when the Democrats assumed control. I was honored to be appointed by Speaker Pelosi to the Committee on Climate Change and Global Warming, where we provided a forum for 4 years to deal with these issues. And there were a range of items that moved forward, including some that were enacted into law and signed by George Bush. Like, remember the light bulb efficiency standards? That radical provision that the Republicans, when they assumed control, tried to undo. The industry said no. People had moved on. But it is an illustration of what has happened here. They abolished the Committee on Climate Change. It reached the point where in our committees, the people who were in leadership basically had sworn an oath. They're not talking about climate. It was verboten. And someday, Jane Lubchenco, who's leaving office as the NOAA director, has a story to tell about the misfortune when she had an efficiency proposal that had the word climate in it. And therefore it was a non-starter. This is serious business. I am hopeful that not only will we give voice to what people out there are concerned about, because they are, but we will also be a forum through which we can work with our colleagues to make sure in each committee, on budget, on ways and means, on commerce, on appropriations bills, we'll be looking for areas to try and make some progress. This suddenly got very personal for me. In the last 5 months, I had my first 2 grandchildren. And if these young men have the life expectancy of their great-grandmother, who lived to be 87 and a half, that will be the year 2100, when these projections of sea level going up 2, 3, 6 feet, and the dramatic changes that we've experienced in this last year are all of a sudden routine. So I can't say enough how pleased I am with my colleagues taking this initiative, because it is serious business. We're going to hold them accountable, and we're going to give people hope who are in the business community, the academic community, and government, that somebody on Capitol Hill is on their side and working with the administration. And it is my great pleasure to introduce my colleague from Vermont, Peter Welch, somebody who has a lot of experience in environmental issues as a state official and here in Congress, being a part of some of those energy-saving initiatives that we were able to work with the Bush administration, and comes from the state of Vermont that climate change is going to have a problem. They will no longer be skiing, and even the maple trees will be threatened. Peter.
Nervous. Thank you. Thank you, Earl. You got to love Congress. Nobel Prize winners say climate change exists, and we deny it. And Congress has become a fact-free zone. And what's quite astonishing is that if you don't want to believe Nobel Prize winners, we ought to pay attention to Bob Dylan. You don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing. And just look out the window. The seas are rising. Droughts, wildfires, floods, the biggest storm in Vermont, Tropical Storm Irene, the biggest storm since 1927. So whether you want to deny science or not, your own reality, and Americans get this, is that we are having weather events that are being incredibly costly with the FEMA budget, emergencies that are now becoming routine as opposed to emergencies. We've got to address climate change, if not because by doing so we actually can create jobs and address the problem. If not, because we can reduce the carbon emissions. If not, because ignoring reality is not actually a good long-term strategy. We've got to address climate change because the effects of these weather extremes are having an enormous adverse impact from Vermont to California. In the options of just funneling money more and more into emergency relief when we've got a chronic condition is not going to do the job. I mean, we're talking about putting up seawalls around New York City. The mayor is talking about that seriously. Those are expensive dead-end propositions. So the alternative is we get going now, and we don't have a debate about the merits of Nobel Prize-winning opinions. We just go back to Bob Dylan and get on with our work. This is really very, very consequential, and we are ignoring this at our peril. So it's wonderful to be part of this caucus. Time to get something done. Thank you. Who's next? Oh. My favorite member of Congress.
I've already spoken.
These are all good friends of mine. Lois Capps, come on up. Thank you.
Sure, Peter. And with Peter, we go With Peter, we go from Vermont with Peter Welch back out to California, showing the diversity of what this caucus represents. And I want to thank our leader, Henry Waxman, for convening us. And I'm so honored to join my colleagues from around this country. We represent a diversity of areas, but we are speaking today, and we will continue to speak with one voice about the imperative needs that we face to address climate change. Regardless of your views about its causes, and there are a variety of views as to why we have climate change, but the indisputable fact is that our climate is changing. We see its impacts everywhere for all the reasons my colleagues have mentioned. I also see it in my coastal district. Sea level has been rising. Erosion is occurring. Flooding. I had fishermen in my office this week from Morro Bay. Our fishermen, our fisher folk, they know very well that the oceans have been changing and are continuing to change, and it affects their livelihood very dramatically. These changes pose a serious threat to our public health, to our safety, and certainly to our economy. Now, states and local communities are beginning to take action. They're adapting and they're strengthening local infrastructure. I have a coastal city on the central coast of California that is dealing with erosion into the ocean of its seawall, and they're finding ways and needing to find resources to strengthen the seawall. They're adapting and strengthening local infrastructure. And as they do this, they're creating jobs. They're strengthening their communities. They're adding to our economy. But our communities can't do this alone. They need federal help, and that's what we're here to voice on their behalf. So I'm very proud to be a part of this caucus and to help keep up the pressure. Climate change is not going away, and neither will we. And again, we'll turn now to the Atlantic coast, and I want to introduce our colleague, Congressman Chris Van Hollen. We know him chiefly as the top Democratic member of the House Budget Committee. He's also a tireless advocate for renewable energy and energy efficiency. He can speak clearly to this from the budget point of view. Chris is not only good with numbers, he's a true leader on environmental issues in the House of Representatives. Chris.
Thank you, Lois. Well, thank you, Lois, and I want to thank Lois and all my colleagues, especially Henry Waxman, for pulling us together to form the Safe Climate Caucus. And my colleagues have talked a lot about the very real toll that we'll see in terms of human costs as well as economic costs if we don't do something with respect to climate change. My colleague Donna Edwards talked about the impact in the Chesapeake Bay watershed area on our economy. And that's just one part of the country, one part of the world that will see that kind of devastating economic impact. But I want to say a word also about the economic opportunity posed by addressing this challenge. Because by working together as a country to address these challenges, we can be on the cutting edge of new jobs and new opportunities while we address a very serious problem. Let's just take what we've already done with respect to improving the efficiency of automobiles. We put in place policies that over the next many years will significantly increase the fuel efficiency of automobiles, double it. What does that mean? More money in the pockets of consumers and our constituents that they can go out and spend on other things in the economy. The same is true when we make our homes more energy efficient. You put people to work making those homes more efficient, and the homeowners have a little bit more money to go out and spend. Renewable energy industry. We've seen a doubling of renewable energy generation in the last 4 years because of some of the policies that the President and our colleagues here took. New electricity generation, new power generation, majority of it last couple of years in the area of renewable energy. So that's jobs and that's huge opportunity. So on the one hand, if we do nothing, you're going to see a huge human and economic toll. And on the other hand, if we act in addition to avoiding those terrible consequences, we can have huge positive economic gains that would put the United States at the cutting edge of this in this important area. And in Maryland, our region, we already did what we call RGGI, which is already projected to save consumers lots of money by making electricity and power use more efficient, as well as new jobs by focusing on these new forms of energy. So, yes, on the one hand, we need to avoid the terrible costs of doing nothing and ignoring the science. And yes, huge economic opportunities if we move forward together and do the right thing. And now I'm very pleased to go back to the Pacific Coast, the West Coast, and introduce a good friend and colleague, Doris Matsui, who is a champion of legislation that protects us from the effects of climate change and is focused very much on protecting our oceans, our public lands, and our wildlife. We're very fortunate to have Doris as part of this caucus. Doris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much, Chris, and I want to thank Chairman Waxman for putting us together on this Safe Climate Caucus. It's something that we all felt needed to be done because there's not enough voices out there, and when we sit in our committees, we don't actually hear from the experts. I think that was related before. I'm so pleased to be here this morning because all of us have a deep commitment to mitigating and reversing the effects of climate change. This issue is here. It's not going to go anywhere, and we can no longer afford to ignore it and pretend it isn't happening, like some policymakers would prefer. Extreme weather we see all the time is happening all over the country. Every day we see something happening. And over the past year itself, our nation has experienced the unfortunate and dramatic consequences of droughts, wildfires, hurricanes, flooding. The tragic flooding from Hurricane Sandy was a vivid reminder of the devastating impacts that can result from global warming. I come from California. I represent the capital city, the Sacramento region. We're at the confluence of two great rivers in Sacramento and California. The Sacramento River, which is the mother river, and the American River, which comes down from the Sierra Nevadas. Now, I know for my purposes it is a priority. We've known about it historically for a very, very long time. But we know that there is a threat. Climate change is real, and it needs to be addressed, and my constituents thoroughly understand that. This shouldn't be a partisan issue at all. We know it's a priority. My constituents talk about it all the time. We realize, perhaps in California, we feel the effects constantly. It's a very diverse state, a large state, as you know. But all of us understand that it is happening. Now, we owe it to all Americans, now and future generations. One of my colleagues talked about his two new grandchildren. Well, not all of us here have grandchildren. A lot of us here do. I have two. And I think that really does focus what we're talking about here today. Ann and Robbie are going to be here far longer than I'm going to be here. And I want to ensure that we do everything to ensure that they actually have a place that they can grow and thrive and breathe and enjoy life. This is what it's all about. We really need to focus our efforts not only on what's now, but if we don't take action, what would the future be like? We need to take action now. Thank you. I guess I turn it back to... to another Californian again, back again.
Okay. Well, we have other members who were not able to make it to this press conference that will join us in this Safe Climate Caucus and participate in speaking out about this issue. And we'll be pleased to take any questions that any of you in the press might want to ask. Yes.
Thanks, Ben. With the Herald, I wanted to ask, of course the Republicans control which bills come to the floor, but there are procedural ways to force votes on things, motions to recommit and so on. I think it's been 4 years since we've had a vote in the House on a major climate proposal. So I guess I'm asking, do members of the caucus intend to use the motion to recommit process to force new floor votes on perhaps a carbon tax or a carbon fee or cap and trade?
Well, the Republicans are on the wrong side of this issue. They're on the wrong side of public opinion. They're on the wrong side of science. And quite frankly, they're on the wrong side of history. They've put themselves in a box, and they're going to have to get out of it because this issue is of growing concern to everyone. I hope we can work together on legislation. There are a lot of things that the president has suggested that should get support from members on both sides of the aisle. A race to the top on efficiency, doing more to get alternatives or renewable fuels. And I believe, quite frankly, and maybe Chris Van Hollen can talk about this, as the people try to figure out the budget problems in dealing with our deficit, it's a lot easier to put a tax on carbon to raise their money and deal with two problems at the same time, reducing our carbon emissions at the same time we reduce our deficit. It's going to be a lot more attractive than some of the other tax alternatives or deep cuts in programs that people depend on, like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So we will look for opportunities to work with our colleagues. The president will be taking action by executive order through his administration. I think that will also encourage the Republican leadership to recognize that from many industries and many points of view in the country, that it'd be far better for Congress to act as well, not just to let the executive branch take on the leadership. But we'll look for every opportunity to raise the issue. Anybody else want to say anything?
There's another question.
Yeah. Speaking of those executive actions, I mean, what is it that the president can do, the executive branch can do to kind of address this issue? I mean, Congress seems to have a pretty big role here.
Yeah.
What can the White House?
Well, we've asked the White House to coordinate their activities throughout the various departments and various areas within the administration. I know EPA can do a lot more. They proposed regulating new power plants to control emissions. They can go forward and complete that rule. They can adopt a rule for existing power plants to reduce emissions, or they can also look to oil refineries to do more. The Department of Energy can move forward on greater energy efficiency, particularly with appliances, which brings not just a reduction in emissions, but a reduction in costs for the consumers. The State Department can do a lot by renegotiating the Montreal Protocol. That dealt with the upper ozone layer, but reducing or eliminating HFCs can eliminate something that is also adding to climate change. There are other ideas, and in fact, Senator Whitehouse and I and many of the people here have joined together in a bicameral group and we wrote to different agencies and to different organizations to get further suggestions. If we concentrate on this problem, we can concentrate on solutions. We may not be able to do everything, but we've got to do something. And our commitment here today is not to sit idly by while the Republican Congress wants us to do nothing. Yeah.
Ed Felker with Energy Guardian. Are you going to move to your own legislation, and how do you look at Senator Boxer and Senator Sanders' bill yesterday? Is that something that you'd like to introduce in the House?
I haven't made any decisions yet, and I think that their bill is a good one to have out there. Let people review it, and hear also other good ideas. But as for myself, I haven't made a decision yet.
And why is that? It would seem that their argument is that they need to have a bill at least to have something to talk about in their chamber. At what point do you need to do the same in the House?
Well, I haven't decided when I need to do that. So I'll let you know when I do. Yes, lady in the back.
Jessica Dever with the Real News Network. Are there certain centerpieces, certain parts of the Sanders-Boxer legislation that the caucus has sort of seen as being fundamental to whatever bill that they consider?
Yeah. The bill's just been introduced. I haven't had a chance to review all its details. I know that they're trying to accomplish the goal that we want. They do it in their particular way, and I don't want to comment on splitting out different pieces of it that I like better than other parts of it. It's a bill in the Senate. and we'll let the senators handle the processing of that legislation.
As a caucus, though, have you met at all and discussed certain things that you know that you want to push forward in your legislative?
Well, there are two groups. One is this Safe Climate Caucus, and this group is committed to speaking out about the climate issue and to take our role in whatever way we find it, but particularly on the House floor. And then there is a bicameral caucus with Senator Whitehouse and myself, which includes many members here. And that caucus has not had a chance to meet and discuss proposals because we're waiting to get back input from the various people to whom we've asked for their views. And then there is a group, another group in the House, and I don't know which we're all, many of us, part of as well. And I don't think they have put forward specific legislation. We'll take this and move forward as fast as we can, as best as we can, with unfortunately obstacles that don't really make sense when you look at the magnitude of the problem. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.